Despite only having 2 seasons, Gravity Falls has one of the most memorable and lovable casts of characters the world of cartoons has to offer. So today we're ranking every Gravity Falls character from worst to best. This is the Gravity Falls tier list. And we're kicking things off with the characters you'd do best to be Warb. This is the D tier, for characters who have the less charming brand of weirdness. First up, we have a dual entry for dead last place, Pacifica's parents, Preston and Priscilla Northwest. Most of the time when a character is meant to be unlikable, we take that into account before we decide whether we love them or hate them, but sometimes the show does its job so well that you just can't help but place them anywhere but dead last.
Yes, I guess.
And considering that Pacifica's parents seem to have used some kind of Pavlovian mind games to turn their daughter into a zombified servant, they earned this spot far more than they did their excessive wealth. I don't know if I'd say that anyone deserves to have all the orifices in their face swapped, but if it had to happen to someone in this series, Preston would be my first choice. From 2 scummy rich folks to just 1, Mr. Bratzman is up next. As the owner, manager of several times, Bratzman is guilty of enslaving and cloning the band so he can make as much money as he can off them for as long as possible. As unlikable as this guy is, I have to admit, considering he's guilty of human trafficking, the fact that he got arrested for a missing license plate of all things is pretty hilarious. Doesn't redeem him in any way, shape, or form, but it was a funny gag. Next we have one of Mabel's many love interests, Gabe Benson. If he doesn't sound familiar, he's the puppet guy. You know, the guy whose entire life revolves around his sock puppets.
Oh hey, I'm Gabe, master of puppets.
There's nothing wrong with being passionate about your interests, of course. It's just, like, there is such a thing as being too passionate and too interested. I think we should reconsider allowing this guy to read to children, just saying. Local news reporter Sandra Jimenez is next, and I would not be bothering to include her if I weren't trying to check off all the noteworthy characters in the show. She's also the kind of person who's more than happy when a famous person dies because it'll classify as real news.
I'm just so happy.
If you've ever wondered who edits the Wikipedia pages of deceased celebrities the moment they pass on, I think the mystery may just be solved now. It's alright, Sandra, I can't blame you for being forgettable when you're overshadowed by the legendary Bodacious T. Let's talk about our first non-human characters, the Manitors. One of the many strange mystical creatures in the realm of Gravity Falls, the Manitors appear in the episode Dipper vs. Manliness, where they basically exhibit every negative stereotype of masculinity you've ever heard of.
He's a human. I don't like him. I don't like your face!
Denying basic human emotions, check. Pain and manliness being one and the same, double check. Trying to kill people who enjoy things they don't perceive as masculine, check. Wait, that one's new, actually. I mean, points for creativity, I guess.
I smell emotional issues.
Well, since we've mentioned one massive group of weird woodland creatures, I think the perfect character to close out the D tier would be the gnomes. While they do appear periodically throughout the series, these little guys played their biggest role in the very first episode in which they tried to kidnap Mabel and make her their queen. Gnome grooming allegations aside, it's kind of cool that they can turn into various giant forms by joining together, and even if they have nothing else in their favor, they do have Schmebulok, and who doesn't like Schmebulok?
Schmebulok.
Now let's move on to the C tier for the characters who at least have more good than bad, even if not by much. First up is another member of the intentionally unlikable category, but Robbie manages to be a lot more endearing than Pavlov Prescott back there. I mean, don't hear what I'm not saying. Is he a jerk? Yes, definitely and absolutely. But his being a jerk makes it refreshing for the show to routinely dunk on him basically every time he's on screen.
I like things that are dumb. I'm Robbie.
Frankly, my biggest complaint about Robbie is that the series does so little with him. Like, he becomes a little more tolerable near the end of the series, but that's mostly credited to him being drugged into falling in love with the girl. There are definitely better redemption arc-esque stories in the show, so we're gonna have to keep him pretty low, but sometimes a show needs a jerk, and Robbie fills that role, if nothing else. Following Robbie are Wendy's other friends, Thompson, Tambry, Lee, and Nate. Yeah, they might be more likable than Robbie, but which is worse, contributing only negative stuff to the series, or contributing basically nothing? It's debatable, but these guys' characters really do begin and end as Wendy's friends. They each have one personality trait, plus the collective personality trait of dunking on Thompson constantly. Not really too much to say about them, really. Okay, I kind of like Thompson. Thompson seems nice. Next up, we have Mayor Befuddlefumpter, dearly departed former mayor of Gravity Falls.
It's okay, they're with me.
Okay, I know this isn't fair, but we just have to mention that the main reason why he isn't any higher is the allegations against him possibly having started World War I. It may be unlikely that what would have been a 5-year-ish old boy could have assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, but we can't fully count it out. Still, other than that, he seems like a gem. Gotta respect a guy who's still putting effort in at the ripe old age of 102. I hope you've been following the rules of your local swimming pool, because Mr. Pool Check is next. The Deep End is a great episode, and this absolute legend is a major major part of the reason why. Like, what went on throughout this dude's life to make him so darn passionate about upholding the rules of this swimming pool?
Mr. Pool Check, are you crying?
I have literally no idea, but something about it is just inexplicably funny, which really describes a lot of the side characters in this show. Feast your eye on Lazy Susan, our next character.
Your eye is weird. Let's talk about that.
It's a shame that her date with Stan earlier in the series never really went anywhere. She seems like one of those genuinely nice, at least adjacent to sane people who helps make the town seem a little less overwhelming. While she's not one of the funnier side characters, she is likable, but let's move on to someone with more surface level likability. Alright, old top. Up next we got good old Bud Gleeful. I cannot unhear the Buck Strickland in this man's voice.
Precious memories.
Fun design and vocal performance aside, Bud is one of those villain parents who does a good job of showing why his son is the way he is. Whereas Gideon is a psychotic child diva, Bud is a con man who spoils his son and exploits him for money. He does a good job of giving an indirect Gideon origin story while still remaining at least kind of endearing compared to him. That said, what the hell did you do to your poor wife, man?
Just keep backing in. Just keep backing in.
Speaking of family members of main characters, Seuss's abuelita is next. She's one of those usually innocent characters who catches you off guard here and there. For every scene where she's being a doting, supportive grandmother to Seuss, there's another where she reveals that she reads his diary when he's away, or straight up follows him during his romantic pursuits. Even at her worst, she's definitely endearing, but like, she really shouldn't be reading her adult son's diary.
Seuss's life is my soap opera.
But when it comes to seeing things you shouldn't be seeing, Blind Ivan is the first one who comes to mind. Honestly, the only reason this guy isn't even higher is the simple fact that he wasn't introduced earlier.
And if you had, you wouldn't remember.
This show revolves around supernatural mysteries, so the fact that the guy whose whole purpose is to erase the people's memories of said mysteries only appears a whopping one time is a downright shame. Really cool concept, it just sucks that it barely got used, but he did indirectly lead to Old Man McGucket getting some plot relevance, so we'll give him credit for that. Another underused character is Time Baby, a futuristic overlord who just so happens to be a baby.
That is one big baby.
There's not too much to say about him, especially since he was killed by Bill Cipher with such ease that even Bill was shocked. But one question about him exceeds all others. Is this one of the babies President Quentin Tremblay put on the Supreme Court?
Appointed 6 babies to the Supreme Court.
It's gotta be, right?
This is a dark day for America.
A quick mention of the love god is in order. Honestly, I love this take on a Cupid portrayal. Yeah, being a cutesy fairy or baby with wings is fun, but somehow the mascot of Valentine's Day being a stoned, half-naked rock star feels absolutely perfect. And who could fill that role better than John DiMaggio? It's a shame that he isn't in a better episode, or at least more than one episode.
I am not loving this.
We have one more C-tier character coming through, and that character is Multibear. He's a 6-headed bear who enjoys Icelandic pop sensation Baba, to the point where when he thought he was about to die, his only wish was to hear Disco Girl one more time. You really can tell a lot about someone by their music taste, huh? Good for him. Even on death's door, he wasn't willing to give up his love for girly pop music. Respect. We've talked about some fun characters.
Did I miss something?
But the B tier is where things are really gonna start ramping up. First in this category, we have Stan's wax figures from the series' 3rd episode. The main reason why I wanted to mention these guys is the fact that this episode just feels like the epitome of Gravity Falls' first season. All of the weird trails the kids follow turn up blank when they investigate Wax Stan's brutal murder, until in a twist of sheer absurdity, it's revealed that the multitude of wax statues Stan had kept in his attic for years were the perpetrators. You know, I don't care what Stan says, buying multiple sentient life forms for only $20 is a total steal. Next, we have a true beacon of masculinity, Manly Dan Corduroy. We're finally starting to get into some of the most memorable side characters. Manly Dan is just one of many, but you can bet that when he's on screen, the cheers of family and friends are sure to follow. Whether he's brutalizing a fish he's already caught or ramming into a government vehicle to defend a boy band's honor, Dan is easily one of the funnier and more unpredictable gag characters in the series. I really wish they'd allowed him to interact with Dipper more. Can you imagine Dipper finding out this absolute beast is his crush's dad? But hey, at least Dipper got to interact with Dippy Fresh, you know, Mabel's own idealized version of Dipper. As much as Mabel is doing Dipper dirty here by implying that he isn't supportive, I'll allow it just this once because Dippy Fresh is such an epic dude that it makes up for any moral implications his existence imply for Mabel. Also, fun fact, apparently Dipper was gonna snap his neck in a deleted scene. I wonder if this show was really intended to be for kids. Several Times is up next. A boy band with enough talent to woo everyone from preteen girls to burly lumberjacks. These guys are an example of just how simultaneously hilarious and horrifying this show can be. On one hand, it's funny how these guys know basically nothing about the outside world due to their boss being a depraved, greedy sociopath. On the other hand, well, they are perpetually being cloned and deprived of basic human rights to make their boss money. I guess you could say they were cloned several times. Mabel may have had to let several times go, but Xyler and Kraz are in the safest place she knows, her imagination. Or at least, I think they are. At the end of Weirdmageddon 2, they come to the reality-altering realization that they actually do exist outside of Mabel's mind. Maybe that's the greatest mystery in the series, after all. The mystery of existence, or the lack thereof.
This whole place is a giant mind.
Alright, enough thought-provoking stuff for now. Let's give the USA guy a quick shout out. Like, come on, get you a man who loves you like USA guy loves his country.
USA!
You know, for my fellow American viewers, I feel like we all know someone who looks almost exactly like this, right? And I know we all know someone who looks like the free pizza guy. All he wants is some free pizza. Like, he even has a free pizza shirt. You gotta wonder how many people thought he was giving the free pizza away because of that, right? No? You aren't wondering that at all? Huh? Okay, alright. There's nothing strange about loving pizza or your country, just like there's nothing strange about Tad Strange. He's a simple man, really.
Loving you, Tad.
He loves bread, he's forever scarred by the horrors he's experienced, and oh, no, that's pretty much it. Well, you know what? He's an honest, friendly guy, and that's worth a lot in a town like Gravity Falls. Jeez, guys, we gotta talk about Blendin Blandin now.
Blendin, Benjamin, Blendin!
Iconic voice aside, Blendin is one of the better one-off antagonists in the series. We see plenty of characters with dangerous powers and resources throughout the series, so it's nice to see a guy like Blendin here and there. A guy so dense that he lets his life's ambition get wrecked by a couple of 12-year-olds messing with him. He doesn't seem entirely evil, but he's just sketchy enough to where you never feel too bad for him.
You shut your time mouth!
Next up, we have Dipper's nearest and dearest friend, Tyrone. Tyrone, we hardly knew him. One of the great things about this series is how it takes common tropes and flips them on their head. When Dipper clones himself to take over his work during the Mystery Shack's big party, it'd be reasonable for you to assume that there'd be some real versus clone shenanigans, but as it turns out, Tyrone isn't just some psycho who wants to take over Dipper's life. He's just, well, he's Dipper with a weakness to water. Using him to point out Dipper's own flaw of overthinking everything was both a really nice storytelling choice and a weirdly relatable fault to point out. But when it comes to Dipper's clones, you can't beat Paper Jam Dipper. What a tragic character. A truly terrible experience. Sorry, that was insensitive. I genuinely feel bad for him. For our last couple of B-tier characters, we have love interests like Melody, Seuss's long-distance turned medium-distance girlfriend. It's a shame that she's barely used outside of her debut episode because her dynamic with Seuss was sweet. She matches his childlike energy but still manages to handle her responsibilities in a mostly mature way. It's always nice to see kind-hearted characters make meaningful connections, so good on Melody for providing us with that vicarious satisfaction. Rounding out the B-tier is perhaps Mabel's only decent love interest, Mermando. On top of the absolutely hilarious fact that this dude's parents named him after his own species, Mermando seems like a pretty chill guy. Considering most of Mabel's summer crushes were either psychopaths, creeps, or both, Mermando's sympathetic quest to get back to the ocean was a breath of fresh air, or water. Honestly, it would have been fun to see him again, or at least his wedding. Now we're moving into the most memorable characters in the ensemble cast. This is the A tier. I do honestly wish I could place Wendy higher, but I sadly have to agree with the majority of fans when I say that she's easily the most underdeveloped of the main cast. Every other major character gets at least one episode devoted to them specifically, but Wendy is only ever in the spotlight when it's a means of supplementing Dipper and Mabel's adventures. That doesn't mean I don't like her though. Wendy is nice, she genuinely cares about the people around her, and she's honestly pretty badass when the show lets her shine, especially during Weirdmageddon. If we do get that revival everyone's speculating about, I hope she gets a little more screen time. That does not involve someone else simping on her, please, for the love of God. Sir Quentin Tremblay III is putting up his dukes next. This man is a true icon. Only Gravity Falls could do something as absurd as inventing an 8.5 president and have it accepted fully as canon. Tremblay is a genuinely funny character for just how absurdly silly he is throughout his admittedly small amount of screen time. Not to mention, he's a great means of pointing out how invaluable Mabel's silliness can be. It's a shame he never comes back, nor does the president's key he gives to Dipper. Like, come on, that would have really been useful.
It's less than worthless, my boy.
How about we get to some villains? Next up is the Summerween Trickster, who is living, formerly proof that Halloween is less of a time and more a way of life.
Traumatized.
Having a villain made of the rejected kinds of Halloween candy is a really fun concept, as is the fact that he's so bitter about not being eaten. Also, for anyone who's interested, the Trickster cries tears made of candy corn, meaning he's on the candy corn sucks side of the debate. Now respectfully argue amongst yourselves in the comments. Seriously, it helps the algorithm or something. Up next is Giffen, the dating app who went full-on yandere on poor Seuss. Really, Giffen is this high up primarily because she's just a great parody of weirdly in-depth dating sims, as well as indie games in general. I mean, fans often joke joke around about how this episode inadvertently predicted both Five Nights at Freddy's and Doki Doki Literature Club. Given how fun the parody is and how great the episode is, Giffany is a character who earns a lot of points right off the bat. But while this may be a hot take, Rumble McSkirmish is still the king of Gravity Falls gaming parodies. First of all, incredible name. Second of all, the parody of everything from fighting games to classic arcade games, even side-scrolling beat-em-ups, they're all on point.
No, I have no looking up.
And Rumble does a great job of bringing stuff into that classic Gravity Falls branded weirdness. Not to mention that if someone ever kills your loved ones, you can count on Rumble to avenge you. Just do not lie to him about it. On the topic of vengeance, the Northwest Mansion Ghost is up next. Like Giffany, much of his being placed this high up is due to him being from one of the series' best episodes. The whole origin story of him being an exploited lower-class worker makes you sympathize with him, but the whole paralyzing multitudes of people, including children thing, keeps him firmly in the villain category. He also led to Pacifica getting some decent redemption too, so points for that. Speaking of, as divisive as this will probably be, Pacifica Northwest has earned a pretty high spot on our list. I have to admit, it's commendable for a series to be able to take a character as utterly unlikable as Pacifica and make her genuinely sympathetic. As the show gives us more screen time from her, we see that the reason she is the way she is lies in her absolutely horrendous family. And at the end of the Northwest Mansion mystery episode, she opens the doors of her mansion to the common folk. She's at least started to break free from her parents' control, and hopefully she'll keep that sense of common decency that her family has long been lacking. But while Pacifica certainly has the potential to be a friend, Candy and Grenda are already there. Like Wendy's friends, they really begin and end their character arcs as Mabel's friends. Now, some might consider it unfair to put one friend group much lower, but come on, Candy and Grenda have more personality than that bunch ever could. Like, how many of you even knew Nate and Lee had names before watching this? On the contrary, Candy and Grenda are absolute icons, from Grenda being a giant with the occasional shred of gentleness, to Candy being an awkward sweetheart who is definitely harboring some level of resentment towards the world.
I'm prepared to defend myself.
They even act as Mabel's voices of reason sometimes, like trying to get her to let several times go free. But if there's anyone in town who's more reliable, it has to be Big Henry.
Oh, Big Henry's Big Henry.
I will take it.
That's right, we wouldn't dream of forgetting about Big Henry, the Lilliputian who gave his life to get the ball through his tribe's hole at the putt-putt course. Complete with a dramatic death and epic self-sacrifice, this guy is the epitome of what makes a true hero. And while it sucks that he died so soon after his introduction, we can forgive it since he would have soloed Bill in one hit if he'd made it to the finale. Jokes aside, I think we all know who the most powerful creature in Gravity Falls is. To Be Determined, aka Bodacious T.
No one will ever call you that.
Oh.
This guy is this guy's a legend. His indescribable yet fun vocal performance, his unpredictable behavior, and his genuinely unjustified sense of self-confidence. Bodacious T is genuinely hilarious, and I don't think there's a single time he appears on screen without at least making me crack a smile.
Oh, an air freshener. Finally, I'll smell like a person. Steely, steely.
That's the essence of what makes a truly great side character. Closing out the A tier, we have the man who both opened and closed a rift between dimensions, Ford Pines. While he's introduced way later into the series than other major characters, Ford is a classic example of quality over quantity. His first few episodes were some of the best in the entire series, and his introduction led to an endearing dynamic with Dipper, and naturally some serious conflict with Stan. That said, the fact that he ghosted Stan for years over an accident is pretty scummy, which keeps him from the S tier, but still, he's a great character who's earned a lot of respect from us for his ultimate redemption. But not quite enough to be among the absolute best of the best. This is, at last, the S tier. Let's get him going, starting with Tyler Cute Biker. Tyler is one of those supporting characters you just can't help but love. He's like Bruce from Family Guy, just always there to brighten the mood a little bit, no matter how bleak things seem.
Get him! Get him!
Whether he's standing up to Bill Cipher as mayor of the town or cheering on kids fighting at the Several Times concert, Tyler is a never-ending source of enthusiasm for the townspeople.
Local enthusiasm enthusiast, Tyler Cutebaker.
And I hope his term as mayor is still going successfully to this day. But if you ask me, he's got it. Got it. Next, we have a less friendly cute character, Lil Gideon. Acting as the main antagonist of Season 1, Gideon is a cross between a spoiled rich kid, a bit of a neckbeard, and a complete and utter psychopath. And I love him for it. While he has plenty of genuinely threatening moments from his debut appearance to the multiple episodes where he attempts to destroy the Pines family, there are other episodes where he's just being a little nuisance in general. Like, take the pool episode, for instance. He spends the entire episode taking up the specific seat Stan wants just to mess with him. Gotta respect such sweet, petty dedication like that.
So
tired of being cute.
On top of being a funny bad guy, Gideon also proves by the end of the series that he isn't all bad. He even has a bit of redemption by turning against Bill and helping the gang defeat him in the grand finale. It's a good thing Gideon decided to follow the law, because Sheriff Blubbs and Deputy Durland will definitely be keeping an eye on him.
If you break the rules, we're gonna zap you.
Zap, zap!
These two are absolute gems. While police in cartoons often tend to be incompetent, cruel, or both, Blubbs and Durland manage to be just a little incompetent, but make up for it by being both well-meaning and endearing.
You are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and breaking our hearts.
The way these guys look and talk to each other is so genuinely sweet. Even if it wasn't all but confirmed that they're a couple, this would be a sincerely sweet dynamic. There's also the fact that Blubbs is voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, who really seems to have a type when it comes to voice acting.
I've got no choice. Our orders come from the very top.
And I mean that as a compliment. Here's hoping Durland eventually got his pink balloon. Even if he didn't, don't worry, we've got something pink in the next spot. Waddles. Just look at him. Come on. You didn't think he'd be anywhere below the top 5, did you? I don't know what it is about cartoon pigs being so needlessly adorable, but I'm definitely not complaining. Waddles waddled, so Fat Nuggets could, Nugget, that, you know what I mean, alright? He's a good pig, and I'd trust him with my life, personally. Okay, now, it feels morally wrong to place these two outside of the top 3, but landing just outside of the podium are Dipper and Mabel Pines, aka the Mystery Twins, copyright Seuss 2012. It might be a bit controversial to rank them both together, but as much as the internet seems to have a thing against Mabel, I think these two are both great. They're lovable characters in their own rights, so let's talk about them, shall we? Starting with Dipper, the main character himself. He really doesn't need much introduction. Well, he obviously is the more mature of the twins, from his obsession with solving mysteries to his willingness to sacrifice for the good of his sister and other loved ones. Dipper is also still very much a flawed kid. He prioritizes his crush on Wendy, uses the town's weirdness to his advantage, and is all around a stressed out mess of a kid. But that just makes him more likable. Dipper isn't perfect.
I'm fine! Everything's fine!
But he makes up for this by being supportive, hardworking, and dedicated. Now, what if I told you that all 3 of those traits apply to Mabel as well? Mabel gets some grief for admittedly valid reasons. She can be extremely selfish, allowing Dipper to make constant sacrifices for her and rarely returning the favor. But all that aside, Mabel is arguably the most thoughtful and sweet character in the show. She takes pleasure in making the people around her happy, from trying to matchmake for Robbie to making sweaters for everyone during Weirdmageddon.
Thanks for these apocalypse sweaters, Mabel. The end of the world has never been so comfortable.
She's also genuinely hilarious, even when she is being reckless and selfish.
Last night, an owl tried to eat my tongue.
That's great!
And like, guys, she's 12. Kids tend to be selfish. In fact, you were also a kid at one point. Crazy stuff, I know, but sarcasm aside, while I get the reason behind people disliking Mabel, it's by no means a train we've hopped on here at Wicked Binge. The Mystery Twins are both legends, only kept outside of the top 3 because the remaining characters are just that good. With 3 sides and 1 eye and a whole lot of crimes against humanity, Bill Cipher takes home the Bronze Medal of Greatness. This little triangle dude is an absolute icon. Chaotic villains are in short supply nowadays, but Bill manages to deliver that brand of evil in spades. There's no deep, dark backstory here, nor is there any good intentioned motive or anything. Bill literally just likes to mess things up for no reason, but the sheer pleasure of it. He's the personification of hedonism and triangularity, doing everything he does for fun and games. That iconic voice and design just make him even better. Like, he's such a genuinely threatening creature, but he looks like he could easily be drawn by a 3rd grader. I love that, but there are still 2 characters I love even more.
You're making a mistake! I'll give you anything!
Now, some dudes would say Seuss shouldn't be this high up, but hear me out. Seuss is one of the kindest and funniest characters in Gravity Falls.
The question mark. This one's unsolvable.
In fact, I wouldn't fault anyone for saying he's on the farthest end of both of those categories.
Okay, what's closest to our present situation?
Seuss is just a chill, thoughtful guy who doesn't have a bad bone in his body. Despite being the clumsy one, Seuss is still a genuinely helpful guy.
If anyone asks, I'm not Seuss.
Whether he's acting as a protective older brother figure to Mabel and Dipper, or using his handyman skills to help on their adventures.
When the universe is broken, only one handyman can fix it.
Seuss is the definition of a gentle giant. He's funny and sensitive, but that never gets in the way of him being genuinely useful, which earns him a lot of points in my book. If we're talking about sheer likability, Seuss takes home the gold any day, but when it comes to taking the entire character into account, by process of elimination, the Golden Medal of Greatness goes to none other than Grunkle Stan. And I'm sure he'll be more than happy to get something golden.
Right, like I'm gonna fall for that.
The reason I rank Stan as the best character in Gravity Falls is the simple fact that he illustrates every great aspect of the show.
Please, ladies, control yourselves.
Gravity Falls and its cast are based on 3 major traits: mystery, comedy, and heart. From episode 1, Stan has exhibited all of these perfectly, from mysteriously entering that vending machine door at the end of the episode to constantly being the butt of jokes about just how much of a sketchy con man he is.
$20? I'll just take them when you're not looking.
What?
I said I was gonna rob you.
But while on the surface this is Stan's greatest flaw, it's also what makes him our top pick. When it's eventually revealed that Stan's whole con man persona was a result of his efforts to save his brother from being trapped in another dimension, everything he's done throughout the series is completely recontextualized. Every lie he told the kids wasn't to be secretive, but to keep them safe. Every con he pulled was an effort to save his brother from a mess he wrongly considered himself responsible for. And in the end, he was willing to give up his very being to save his family and the entire world from Bill.
You're our hero, Stanley.
If you can overcome all that hardship and still come across as the funniest character in the show, you're a shoo-in for our top pick, hands down. With a fairly new book release and a plethora of revival rumors, the internet's made a triumphant return to the mysterious and hilarious world of Gravity Falls, and that, of course, includes us.
Just going to ignore that.
This is Gravity Falls characters good to evil. Let's get into the weirdness right away. As usual, we're starting with the more semi-trustworthy characters here in the good category. We have a gold medal of good here, and it's time for someone to get it. Get it! That someone is none other than Tyler Cutebiker. Even if you don't remember this guy's name, you'll no doubt remember him being one of the most iconic running gags in the show. There certainly isn't anything bad to say about Tyler. He's a mild-mannered enthusiasm enthusiast who's always there to hype people up, particularly big buff redheads. I mean, hey, we're not judging. As for why Tyler's our top pick, that involves his role in The Stanturian Candidate and beyond. Here, Tyler's the most honest of the Gravity Falls citizens running for mayor, and when Weirdmageddon comes about, Tyler puts himself in between the townspeople and Bill Cipher to protect them. He might be scrawny and delicate, but Tyler has a heart of gold and a will of steel, so if you ask us, he deserves the gold medal of good. Taking a close runner-up spot is Seuss.
Your face is good. I'm a Seuss.
Come on, who doesn't love Seuss, dudes? This lovable gopher, or human, it's never really made clear, is the most faithful ally of the beloved Mystery Twins. He's always down to join them on adventures, being just as much of a kid at heart as Dipper and Mabel are kids at everything else. While he's a bit of a man-child, Seuss is also a good big brother figure. He's willing to risk his life to protect Dipper and Mabel, from saving them from Gobblewonker to describing looking out for them as his personal mission in the episode Not What He Seems. The absolute worst we could say about Seuss is that he's childish, but frankly, the worst this ever leads to is some poor social skills.
So, you're probably a girl, right? Wrong.
At the end of the day, Seuss is still a sincere, compassionate man who always puts others above himself, and that earns him a high spot on our list. I mean, let's not forget that even becoming a literal zombie couldn't stop him from being pretty polite.
Can I eat your brain?
We didn't give him nearly enough credit last time around, so today the bronze medal of good goes to Dipper Pines. While Mabel is more consistently portrayed as the nice sibling, I don't think quite enough light is shown on just how good of a guy Dipper is. Being a kid, he does have his moments of impulsivity and selfishness, from brainwashing Stan during his mayoring campaign to basically everything he did during his pursuit of Wendy. Even if he didn't mean to, he still almost got Robbie killed by a video game character. That said, none of this takes away from the fact that, on the whole, Dipper is one of the most kind-hearted and selfless characters in the series. While the twins obviously love each other, Dipper is much more overtly selfless in their relationship. He constantly makes sacrifices for the sake of her safety, culminating in his willingness to give up the opportunity to do a summer internship with Ford so she would come back to the real world. Even though Mabel ultimately gave him her blessing to go for it, the fact that he was willing to give it up regardless is still really sweet. And all of that isn't even to mention how many dangerous creatures he uncovered throughout his summer at Gravity Falls. Dipper's a good guy, and while he might have a bit of a smarty shorts attitude, I'd say he's earned it. Following the podium of good, we move on to the adorable Waddles.
Oh my gosh, a pig!
This should require little to no explanation, honestly. Whereas the human characters pretty much always have some kind of sin to attribute to them, Waddles is a puppy in a pig-shaped package. He's always loyal to Mabel, Dipper, and the rest of the Mystery Shack. He might not have all the heroic deeds that our top three have, but he's more than happy to go along with whatever makes Mabel happy that day, and being a loyal companion like that is worth a lot. But Waddles isn't Mabel's only friend. Next up we have Candy and Grenda.
I'm so excited I can't breathe!
Really, these two both have their strengths and weaknesses.
Too much!
Grenda is super confident and strong and uses that strength to help her friends however she can. Candy, on the other hand, is more brains than brawn, but she's also more sensitive and openly empathetic than Grenda. On top of that, both of them are fiercely loyal friends to Mabel and often act as voices of reason to her, like when they tried to convince her to let several times go free. The worst we can say about these two is that they're, like, flawed human beings, which, like, oh no! We're talking about a triangular Satan later on, so I think we can forgive being a little aggressive or underhanded here and there. Who hasn't let a crush undermine their life in some way, after all. Speaking of crushes, we have the first real girl lucky enough to score a date with Seuss, Melody. She only really appears a couple of times throughout the series, so this is going to be a short entry, but beyond being a genuinely sweet lady, we also have to shout out the fact that she was willing to give Seuss another chance after their date ended in them almost getting murked Five Nights at Freddy's style. That showcases some serious patience, and at the end of the series, they're working at the Mystery Shack together, so hopefully that means they're as happy as ever. Now on to a love interest with way more screen time, Wendy Corduroy. Wendy has two core traits that make up the bulk of her character. She's cool, and she's Dipper's crush. Being a teenager, she does have her self-centered moments, alongside being willing to bully Thompson for basically no reason but sheer fun, which, to be fair, is something the whole group is guilty of, except maybe Mabel. Anyway, Wendy can also take advantage of others' kindness. She slacks off at her job whenever she can, leaving most of the work to Seuss, and when Mabel briefly took over for a bit, Wendy manipulated her into letting her do whatever she wanted. She earns the Sloth medal for these misdeeds. But thankfully, that's about as bad as Wendy's ever gotten. Her misdeeds are mild, and they don't come anywhere close to outweighing her good ones.
You're the coolest person I know.
I know, dude. Tell me about it later.
From helping Dipper and the gang out in countless dangerous missions, including Weirdmageddon, she's also able to handle some topics with sensitivity, like when she managed to let Dipper down easy when he finally confessed to her. She's also willing to use her strength to stick up for her friends, and like Seuss, is willing to look out for the younger kids of the friend group, like when she tagged along with Mabel and her friends on their unicorn hunting quest. This might be controversial, or it might not be. Actually, it probably isn't. Mabel Pines is a character who is as divisive as she is lovable, and she's pretty darn lovable. In some ways, as weird of a comparison as this is going to seem, Mabel is the Ned Flanders of Gravity Falls. Think about it, she's sweet to the point where her whole character is basically self-defined by it. In the episode The Last Mabelcorn, the very notion that she isn't completely pure of heart gives her a full-on existential crisis, and in several episodes she uses her leisure time to do kind things for others. While she can take a little too much pride in being good, there's no denying that she takes sincere pleasure in doing kind things for people, from matchmaking to helping them overcome their fears. But then there's the elephant in the room, and that's the fact that Mabel is selfish.
Well, it's a horrible opportunity for me!
At least a little bit selfish. Let me just clarify that I do not think Mabel deserves to be demonized quite so much by the fandom. While she's certainly self-serving, she does usually come around and learn her lesson at the end of the day, like encouraging Dipper to go for Ford's internship if he really wants to. But that doesn't change the fact that while Mabel isn't a bad person or even sibling, she doesn't do nearly as much for Dipper as she does for her.
But today I learned that morality is relative.
She tends to prioritize whatever random dude she has a crush on that week, which makes her a relatively easy choice for the Lust Sinner medal. The result is Dipper often having to sacrifice his own happiness just for Mabel to have a chance at hers. There are moments like in Sock Opera where she makes an effort to repay his kindness, showing that she genuinely is grateful to him. But there are other moments like in Weirdmageddon where her desire to stay in an endless summer brings about the freaking apocalypse, though in her defense there's no way she could have known that would happen, and we all know Mabel's pretty easy to manipulate. Speaking of easy to manipulate, Thompson. Poor Thompson. This guy is a punching bag for his friends, all for the sake of being friends with them.
I'm just happy to be included.
I mean, heck, in the Love God episode, even Dipper messes with him. Dipper!
The perfect way to sneak cheap snacks into the concert. And it was all Dipper's idea.
Literally all Thompson wants is to be included, to the point where when the group falls apart, he makes it his mission to help them get along by any means necessary. This guy deserves better, plain and simple. How many times does Thompson deserve better? Several times. Mabel, Candy, and Grenda's favorite boy band turned out to be a product of Hollywood's corporate greed, handmade to be sold to screaming kids and their exhausted parents. Of course, that's par for the course for Hollywood, but for several times, it's literal. Like, these guys are treated as animals by their boss, only given substantial nourishment if they perform well, and threatened with being replaced by clones if they step out of line. Thankfully, when the girls free them, the guys remain pretty nice. Later on in Weirdmageddon, they act as a power source for the Mystery Shack robot the town uses to fight Bill. Making up yet another member of the characters I don't really have much to say about group is Lazy Susan. Nicknamed as such due to her lazy eye, Susan runs Greasy's Diner and seems to be pretty friendly with all her customers. Aside from that, the most notable thing about her was her date with Grunkle Stan, which, I mean, I guess I can't take points off for that, right?
Your eye is weird. Let's talk about that.
Look, not all of these characters can be interesting to talk about. Some might say that the next spot on the list goes to Mermando. This is because it is true.
There are some who call me Mermando. This is because Mermando is my name.
Mermando doesn't really play a huge role in the series. In fact, he's straight up only on screen in one episode, later appearing as a cameo in the Society of the Blind Eye episode when he's forced into an arranged marriage to a manatee. So we never saw much of him, but it says a lot about his character that he was selfless enough to marry her to keep his kingdom safe, and even write to Mabel about it so she could move on easily. Even if he couldn't be a boyfriend, he could be a pretty good friend, which is valuable in and of itself. We're moving into the more flawed characters of the good tier now. Up next is Seuss's Abuelita, voiced by Matt Chapman, doing a pretty solid impression of Consuela from Family Guy.
I
I vacuum the walls now.
Abuelita is the only blood relative Seuss seems to be in regular contact with. I mean, they do live together after all. She's obviously a loving grandmother to Seuss, trying her best to protect him from the truth of his dad abandoning him in his childhood. She even made him dinosaur-shaped cookies to try and cheer him up. That almost makes up for her stalking him during his dates with Melody. Like, girl, you just watched your grandson get nearly murdered multiple times. That's gotta be some points off, right? But since she's pretty good overall, I see no reason to get Deputy Durland and Sheriff Blubbs. This mad with power police couple makes up two of the most iconic side characters in the show, which is saying a lot. They have quite possibly the most sweet and supportive dynamic out of any two characters in the show, and while they're not exactly the most reliable cops around, they're always ready to uphold justice and to lift each other up while they're at it.
You are a diamond in the rough.
The worst we could say about them, save for their occasional incompetence, is the fact that they do tend to make fun of the townsfolk pretty often, from clearly distressed citizens like Old Man McGucket to Dipper, who is a literal child. Next is the 8th and a half President of the United States, Sir Quentin Tremblay III.
8th and a half?
Tremblay isn't this low in the category because of any particular moral failings, rather, he's here because he just really did not find the right line of work for himself. Being known as the silliest president in US history, he didn't really do anything, I'll say, practical with his time in office.
He waged war on pancakes.
Nonetheless, he isn't a bad guy by any means. He even invoked his presidential privileges to send Blubbs and Durland on vacation, despite them trying to put him away for the bulk of the episode. He might not be a good president, but that doesn't keep him from being a pretty decent guy overall. Now it's time to move on to one of the series' best redemption arcs, Fiddleford McGucket. If we only had season 1 to go off of, Old Man McGucket would be way lower. In this season alone, he's guilty of multiple felonies, from making a robot monster to get his son's attention to having a criminal record consisting of making other giant robots to cope with other traumas. McGucket is truly a sight to behold. Friendly though he may be, he's still not quite right in the head.
Attention all units. We got ourselves a crazy old man.
But later on, it's revealed that he wasn't always like this. In the past, Fiddleford founded the Society of the Blind Eye, a society which endeavored to erase the memories of various Gravity Falls citizens, and the use of which broke his mind severely. This was a tough pill to swallow for McGucket, made no easier by the fact that he worked alongside Ford to help create his interdimensional machine, and was traumatized by the sight of Bill's true nature. This led him to leave Ford with a warning that his invention was too dangerous, and the trauma led him to create the memory erasing gun in the first place. He ultimately redeems himself by righting his wrongs though. He takes a mind bullet for Dipper, works to discover the truth of what's going on in Gravity Falls, and plays a major role in helping convert the Mystery Shack into a mech that can fight Bill. And while there's definitely a case for placing him lower, we can't think of anyone better to close out good category than Stanley Pines, aka Grunkle Stan. Arguably the funniest and most intriguing character in the show, Grunkle Stan is quite the tumultuous character when it comes to morals. On one hand, the guy is a con artist through and through. He endangers his kids and makes them accomplices to various crimes, like counterfeiting money, and has a list of crimes large enough to take up the whole screen of a news broadcast.
Extensive criminal record.
Stan, what did you do?
What didn't I do?
Stan is a penny pincher through and through as well.
I'm giving none of this to charity!
And while he does care about his family quite dearly, even willing to fight a pterodactyl to save Mabel's pet, that would only be enough to save him from falling fully into bad territory. Thankfully though, Stan's whole story is a lot more sympathetic. After he accidentally ruins Ford's science fair experiment, Stan is kicked out of his family until he can make them a fortune, leading him to desperately make money by whatever means he could, legal or otherwise. Later, when he witnessed Ford being sucked into his own machine, Stan worked day and night to make enough money to pay his home's mortgage and eventually rescue his brother, and thus the Mystery Shack was born. Stan certainly deserves the Greed Cinder Medal, but for a pretty respectable reason. The guy devoted his life to hard work and con artistry, all for the sake of saving his brother, who'd actively ghosted him for the better part of a decade. If that weren't enough, in the series finale, he was willing to sacrifice his mind to Bill in a gambit to finally destroy him for good. Even though he ultimately bounced back and regained his memories, Stan was literally willing to give up his very essence to protect the rest of Gravity Falls, and if that's not a deed worthy of being called a hero, I don't know what is. But with that, it's time to move into neutral territory. From slightly shady characters to borderline criminals, this is the gray area. I'll admit, we might be breaking a few hearts or keyboards with this one, but Ford, aka Stanford Pines, is up next. Although he's missing in action for 3/4 of the series, Ford still manages to make a huge impact when he finally shows up. If his six-fingered hand doesn't make it obvious enough, Ford is the one who wrote the infamous journals during his research in Gravity Falls.
A journal. Just going to ignore that.
Ford discovered a ludicrous amount of ludicrous stuff here, making him one of the series' most intelligent characters, not to mention helping Dipper and Mabel immensely throughout the show, albeit mostly indirectly. Unfortunately, while Ford is a decent man at the end of the day, he loses points for his willingness to endanger the universe to continue his research. This is mostly the fault of Bill, who tricked him into granting access to his mind, but it doesn't excuse the fact that he also tried to use Stan, who he hadn't spoken to in years at the time, to take his research far away. Given how much being ghosted hurt Stan and how ungrateful Ford was when he rescued rescued him, we have to place Ford a little lower than his twin. Nonetheless, I'd say he mostly redeemed himself in the end, even making good on the pair's childhood promise to go on adventures together. Next, we have an umbrella entry for Wendy's friends, Lee, Nate, and Tambry. Really, these three are pretty much just normal teenagers with normal teenage flaws. They're reckless, impulsive, and sometimes downright mean, mostly shown through their treatment of poor Thompson. Still, at the end of the day, they don't have any outright terrible qualities, even if they also don't really have any great ones. Our next character goes by many names, known as the Raz Dazzler, Bodacious T, or for the sake of our rankings, Toby Determined. He's one of those chaotic side characters who's really hard to pin down in terms of morality. In some episodes, he's a pretty decent guy who minds his own business, from performing at Seuss's birthday party to seemingly having a successful news career alongside Sandra Jimenez at the end of the series. At other times, however, you see him doing some pretty sketchy stuff, like being part of the Society of the Blind Eye, for one thing. There was also that time he tricked Dipper into giving up the Mystery Shack's address, handing it over to Gideon in exchange for Sandra Jimenez's phone number. The guy can be a little creepy, but he's friendly enough and has a somewhat intact moral compass. Let's give a quick mention to Multi-Bear.
What is a multi-bear?
The arch nemesis of the Manotors. Why is he their arch nemesis, you may ask? Well, that's simple. He likes girly pop music. No, really, that's it. I'm not joking. The guy seems pretty chill aside from that. Heck, he even helps out in the fight against Bill during the series finale, which shows that he's got a good heart, or a set of heads on his set of shoulders. Anyway, next is another minor character, Mr. Poolcheck. I have nothing against being passionate about what you care about, but this guy might be taking that notion a little too far. Poolcheck takes a lot of pride in his swimming pool and expects his workers to do the same. His underage workers, he has no problem yelling at kids like a drill sergeant for the sake of keeping the place running smoothly. In his defense, he really is just doing his job.
He seems emotionally unstable.
But he's doing it a little more aggressively than he needs to. But if you're looking for an aggressive character, Rumble McSkirmish fits the bill even better. In one of the best episodes of the series, Dipper summons Rumble as a bodyguard of sorts to protect him from Robbie, who wanted to fight him. While being a presumably grown adult trying to fight a high schooler is morally questionable at best, Rumble does come from a different world than Dipper, and on top of that, he was tricked into believing that Robbie killed Dipper's father.
He killed your father?
Sure.
While Rumble is vengeful and violent, always ready to find an opponent to battle with, he ultimately helps Dipper and the gang defeat Bill in the end, and some would say this is the exact moment when Rumble McSkirmish became Humble McSkirmish still. Up next is local news reporter Sandra Jimenez. Aside from being the object of Bodacious T's affection, there isn't too much to say about Sandra. While she seems like an okay, law-abiding citizen on the whole, she's also quite insensitive. When she reports on the death of Mayor Befuddlethumpter, that's his name, right?
Huckabone Befuddlethumpter.
She literally cries tears of joy on air because they finally have real news to report.
I'm just so happy.
Ma'am, a guy just died. Have some respect. Next, we have the type of guy who would eat a bowl of nails for breakfast without any milk. It's Manly Dan Corduroy. On the surface, Manly Dan seems like a spitting image of toxic masculinity.
We punch what we don't understand!
He's a short-tempered guy, and on one occasion he was willing to ram his truck into a car with 2 kids inside just because Mabel wrote several times is overrated on the window. Nonetheless, there's much more to him. Sure, he makes his kids do yearly survival training instead of Christmas, which is pretty messed up, but everything he does seems to be for the sake of keeping them self-sufficient and safe. He can also be generous, using his strength to help protect weaker citizens like Tyler, and even winning pancakes for the whole diner in Dipper versus Manliness. For our next act, we have one of Mabel's many love interests, Gabe Benson. You know, I'm just gonna let this image speak for itself. If nothing else though, he does use his passion for puppets for good sometimes, seemingly volunteering at local libraries to put on shows for the kids. That's cool. Gabe may be snooty about puppets, but at least he isn't snooty about basically everything, like Pacifica Northwest. Pacifica's character can be best summed up in 2 simple words: the worst. She's snarky, mean, rich. Well, okay, I guess rich isn't bad on its own. Still, she uses her high status as a means of belittling others, making her an easy choice for the pride sinner medal. There really isn't much overtly good to say about Pacifica, to be honest, but we're gonna have to give her some leeway out of sheer sympathy.
If I die, I'm suing all of you.
While she is admittedly the worst, you have to remember that Pacifica is a child, and she's a child whose parents have literally trained her like a dog to be thoughtlessly obedient to them whenever her father rings a bell. She has done a few good deeds, albeit reluctantly, even helping the town stop Bill in the series finale. It's also implied that she has at least some level of respect for the twins now, considering that she even wrapped their 13th birthday party presents.
When are you gonna open your presents already? I broke a nail wrapping them.
If she's able to break away from her toxic family, Pacifica has the potential to be a decent person. As a result, we won't put her any lower. For from a potential future to an actual future. Next up is Time Baby. Despite being a baby, Time Baby isn't exactly innocent. In fact, he's basically the tyrannical overlord of the universe in the far distant future. While he is ruthless in his methods, he still works to maintain stability in the space-time continuum, even losing his life against Bill during the final battle. From one sort of kind of deity to another, next we have the Love God. This beloved musician lives up to his name, with the credentials and resources to control the love lives of people around him. Despite the clear importance of his job, not to mention the risks it entails, Love God doesn't really take it too seriously. He gets distracted enough to let a 12-year-old steal one of his love potions, after all, and ultimately relent at the end of the episode, basically giving Mabel permission to literally play God. He certainly isn't a bad guy, but he really isn't the most responsible character around, which is made a bit more serious since he's, a deity. And although it may be a surprise, the last spot in the gray area goes to Archibald Corduroy, also known as the Northwest Manor Ghost. This guy's a long-deceased ancestor of Wendy, but more relevantly, he was a craftsman commissioned to build the Northwest Mansion. The payment for this job would have been inclusion for the entire town at a spectacular annual party, a reward that, although promised, would never be delivered. While his grudge against the Northwest family is completely valid, he still turns a lot of people into straight-up trees in his quest for revenge, including children like poor Dipper and Mabel. Still, he ultimately relented once Pacifica finally opened the gate to the public. He may have been sticking up for social justice in the worst way possible, but he still did it. It's not completely evil, right?
I feel lumber justice.
In any case, this final category goes out to the characters you should never, ever trust. These are the bad to evil characters. Kicking off this category is the lesser of however many evils, Robbie. While Wendy's other friends have a sense of common decency, for the most part, Robbie's a jerk through and through. First and foremost, he's insecure enough to consider Dipper, a boy who's like 4 years younger than him, a legitimate romantic rival. Even before his romance with Wendy, he was mean, like when he stole a piece of Mabel's cotton candy in The Time Traveler's Pig. But it gets worse once he gets with Wendy, from challenging a middle school kid to a full-on fight, to eventually using a mysterious song to brainwash Wendy into giving him another chance after getting dumped. Now, in Robbie's very limited defense, he apparently didn't know about the CD's brainwashing capabilities, but he also claimed to write the song when in actuality he stole it from another band. Something tells me that even if he knew it had brainwashing powers, it wouldn't stop him. Still, while Robbie's a jerk, he isn't completely irredeemable. It seems he's gotten over Wendy by the finale and is able to hang around the other teens again. Hopefully he's learned his lesson and can become a little more like his weirdly chipper parents.
He always says we're too cheerful for funeral directors.
Next, we have the very first bad guys in the series, the gnomes. At first glance, these little guys might seem downright harmless. What mystical forest creature is more innocent than the humble gnome, after all? Well, perhaps none, but a lot of them are less creepy.
This is normal. This is normal for gnomes.
Look, I'm willing to assume these guys didn't know Mabel was a 12-year-old despite all of them clearly being bearded gnome men, but even if we go under the best case scenario assumption that the gnomes aren't child predators, they're still total creeps for attempting to kidnap Mabel and force her to be their bride.
You have no idea what we're capable of.
We can give them some credit for helping stop Gideon and later on Bill, but they never do this without some incentive for themselves, like a new queen.
Whoa, mature woman, huh? Hey, Schmebulok, get my cologne!
Next is another colorful creature of the forest, the majestic unicorn, Celesta Bella Bethabel. Honestly, I feel like just having a name so needlessly complex is enough for me to call her evil, but on top of that, this girl constantly judges whatever human comes her way to keep them from obtaining her magical unicorn hair. It'd be understandable if she were genuinely concerned with protecting her hair, albeit still kind of a jerk move, but considering that Cella Bella Betha, whatever her name is, ends up admitting that she does it just to mess with the humans, we aren't gonna give her any benefit of the doubt. Next up, we have the Lilliputians. Really, these guys are similar to the gnomes in that they're little sentient creatures who try to kill a child on at least one occasion. The difference, however, is that the Lilliputians aren't just trying to kidnap their self-proclaimed queen. Each group of them is trying to prove that they're the best at managing their hole on the putt-putt course, and they're even willing to attempt to murder Pacifica when they think it'll win Mabel's favor. When Mabel rightly turns on them, they decided to gang up on the trio and try to kill all of them, which, as bad as it is, at least shows that they're willing to put their differences aside eventually, right? Tolerance is worth something, at least, which is why the Manotaurs land pretty low on our list. Yeah, obligatory, they helped in the final battle against Bill and all that good stuff. But we're reaching the point on the list where that really isn't worth too much. Like, what else are they gonna do? Their options are literally either fight Bill or perish. So aside from their role in the grand finale, the Manotaurs are the very embodiment of toxic masculinity. They're concerned with nothing but brute strength and general pain and suffering, and they absolutely hate everything that isn't traditionally considered manly.
Kill the multi-bear or never be a man.
This leads to them being incredibly hostile to most outsiders, particularly towards Multibear, who they consider their arch enemy and try to murder just because he has a girly taste in music. The only good trait we can attribute to the Manitors is that they are willing to help Dipper become more manly, but only after he frames it as a challenge, so whatever. Our next treat for you is none other than the Summerween Trickster. Gotta love how creative this series got just to justify a Halloween special despite taking place over a single summer.
Something about this feels unnatural.
The Summerween Trickster is a monster made out of loser candy, circuits, peanuts, off-brand chocolate bars, etc. Basically all the stuff you'd see at the bargain bin after the holidays at Dollar General and still pass over. He resents kids for not eating his candy. Wow, that is a horrifying sentence, isn't it? And threatens to kill them if they don't offer him enough candy before the last jack-o'-melon goes out. While eating children is a pretty terrible thing, obviously, the trickster does ultimately stop his reign of terror when Soos enjoys his candy, showing that at the end of the day, all he wanted was some appreciation. It's time to talk about the man who loves to talk about time. Blendon Blandon is a unique case. On one hand, this guy's frustration with the Pines twins is completely understandable. By stealing his time machine, they caused multiple time anomalies and cost Blendon his job. This led him to plan out a revenge scheme on these two literal children throughout his entire stay in prison, and his plan was ultimately to use a time wish to prevent them from ever being born. Understandable grudge or not, that kind of thirst for vengeance is enough for us to easily give him the Wrath Sinner Medal. On top of that, he ridicules the kids and Soos for wasting their time wish, showing that using a wish to help someone else is a ridiculous concept to him, and that he hadn't learned very much from his defeat at the twins' hands, even after they used a wish to restore his job to him. We're inching ever closer to pure evil territory, and next up is Bud Gleeful, the father of Lil Gideon. It goes without saying that Bud isn't exactly Father of the Year material. While he does seem to sincerely love his son, he's more than happy to use Gideon in his various money-making schemes, including, but not limited to, his celebrity status. We also have to take his clearly distressed wife into account. Like, what's going on there, Bud?
Just keep backing it. Just keep backing it.
Do we have more reasons to call the cops on you than we thought? Bud doesn't really have any redeeming qualities either. He just doesn't do quite as much depraved stuff as the remainder of the list. He's also part of the Society of the Blind Eye, which means the absolute best he'd get is a spot in the gray area. Given everything else about him, though, there's no way we could be that merciful to him. Former town darling turns delinquent Gideon Gleeful is up next. As the main villain of Season 1 and secondary villain of Season 2, Gideon is a mastermind who uses the town's adoration of him to get whatever he wants, whether it's money, fame, or love. Mabel's love, specifically. Yeah, when Gideon's rejected by Mabel, he proves himself to be a total creep by trying to attack Dipper for breaking the news that she wasn't into him. Basically, if you've ever been on that r/nice guys subreddit, you know everything about Gideon's romantic side. He'll be peaches and cream until you cross him, at which point he'll become downright psychotic. We wanted to be a little more lenient on Gideon, given the fact that he's just a kid.
Don't turn this into a big deal.
Oh, I won't. I will.
But considering his regular attempts to kidnap Mabel, ruin the lives of the entire Pine family, and apparent stalking of the entire town, I think this is a fair place for him.
What's the hair?
Gideon's worst deed by far is definitely working alongside Bill, despite knowing how dangerous and evil he is. Until Dipper convinces him to switch sides for Mabel's sake, Gideon works as one of Bill's enforcers, which docks him a lot of points. Nonetheless, he does ultimately fight on the side of good, and by the end of the series, he at least starts reforming as a person.
I'm gonna try to be a little Gideon, regular old kid.
Okay, sure, he's 6 buff prisoners on kids who make fun of him, but at least he's trying to improve now, right? Next we have one of the series' most memorable one-off villains, Giffany. When Soos needs to find a date for his cousin's wedding, he ends up buying a mysterious dating simulator that promises to help him learn how to talk to real women. It turns out that this game is a real woman, however, and pretty much manipulates Soos into talking to her and only her. When Soos actually scores a date and cuts ties with Giffany, she goes berserk and attempts to kill Soos's new lover, not to mention the 2 children who double as his best friends, making this scorned lover the perfect choice for the Envy Sinner Medal.
The way out, Soos, is in my arms!
I guess, in her defense, it can't be entirely easy to exist solely as an AI girlfriend, only given attention for as long as its user doesn't find a real girl to hang out with. But if anything about Giffany were tragic or sincere, it wasn't made overly obvious, so we're keeping her pretty low on the list. We've already talked about the well-meaning founder of the Society of the Blind Eye, but Blind Ivan is the kind of guy who really highlights just why it's such a dangerous group. He abuses the group's capability of erasing the memories of the townspeople to maintain a position of power and secrecy, boasting about how even if you'd met him before, you'd never recognize him. He has no problem with endangering children, nor with the fact that the brain erasing technology slowly destroys the minds of whoever uses it. All this would seem to point to Ivan being a pure evil figure, but to his very limited credit, he does express that the society is partially there to keep Gravity Falls' citizens from worrying about all the weirdness around them. In that sense, I guess he's doing something adjacent decent to good. Still not exactly enough to call the guy a hero at all. The Bronze Medal of Evil goes to a true personification of corporate greed, Mr. Bratzman. He's the manager of several times and is responsible for cloning them indefinitely so we can make as much money as possible off their performances. He keeps these guys caged up like hamsters, seemingly only feeding well the ones who put on a good show. On top of the unspeakably messed up stuff he's doing by enslaving these boys like that, Bratzman is also reaping literally all the rewards for the hard work of his employees, not even allowing them to live lives outside of his cage and whatever concert venue they're playing that day. Bratzman is almost the epitome of what it means to be a truly evil human being. But the Silver Medal of Evil goes to the only human character we'd consider even worse, Nathaniel Northwest. This is probably a controversial placement. Nathaniel, unlike most of the others in this category, doesn't seem to be a full-on criminal, nor is he a literal monster. However, he more than makes up for this by being the sheer essence of a revolting human being. First things first, Nathaniel is a horrible father. He insists that Pacifica win every event she competes in and doesn't even bother to stick around and watch her.
Pacifica, darling, we have a party to go to. We'll just read about your victory in the paper.
If that's not bad enough, the Northwest Mansion mystery episode sees his at-home parenting style. When he rings a bell, Pacifica immediately and almost robotically obeys his commands. It's never revealed exactly what he did to Pacifica to the point where she reacts like this to a ringing bell, but I highly doubt it was something nice. We could go on all day about every horrible thing about this guy.
We'll eat the butler.
He's a neglectful, abusive, and elitist douche who refuses to even acknowledge the existence of poor people. But even with all that considered, he has one deed that makes him even worse, offering his services to Bill Cipher at the start of Weirdmageddon as one of his horsemen. This was a shock to the whole town, including his own family, and for good reason. When he offered himself up to Bill as a servant, he showed that he was more than willing to betray his family, friends, and the whole world just for the sake of being on the winning team. Nathaniel Northwest is an irredeemable monster of a person without a single shred of goodwill in his body, and the most frustrating thing about him is that we still can't place him at number 1. Let's just cut to the chase, alright? We all know by now that the Gold Medal of Evil goes to Ducktective's twin brother, who callously shot his brother in the season finale.
That's the big twist we were waiting for?
Okay, jokes aside though, Bill Cipher was a total shoo-in, and we all knew it. The town has some seriously unsavory characters, but we'd be doing Bill here a total disservice if we said he was anything less than pure, unapologetic evil. Bill is cold, calculating, and sadistic. He uses his nearly limitless power to manipulate and torture lesser beings for the sheer fun of it. Paired with his ruthless, cold nature, his natural charm and charisma make him easily the most dangerous character in the series, to the point where I highly doubt we even have to explain why he's number 1. Like, the guy's entire plan is to destroy the current world and create a new one that suits his psychotic whims. It doesn't get more textbook evil than that. In a world where unapologetically evil villains are becoming harder to come by, Bill has always been a breath of fresh air. Now, for a completely unrelated and not at all distressed reason, let me give you a several-minute review on The Book of Bill and why it's the greatest thing you'll ever read, even if it's not a triangle.
The cartoons that we grew up with have had many creepy and in some cases downright terrifying moments. And in some cases, many of these moments came from an otherwise tame kids show. And that's certainly the case with Gravity Falls. With all its strange creatures and crazy adventures the characters get into, Gravity Falls established itself as one of those cartoons that wasn't afraid to push the barriers with scary moments. And those are the moments that we're going to be looking at today. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and today we're ranking scary moments from Gravity Falls from creepy to terrifying. So today we're going to be looking at the most iconic scary moments from the show, starting with the ones that are just a bit creepy, and working our way up to the most terrifying ones. So let's begin with Dreamscaper's Deer Teeth. In Bill Cipher's debut, Gideon's summoning of him leads to a creepy display of his power. The forest Gideon was in slows down and becomes an eerily grayish color, becoming the mindscape. Bill immediately surprises Gideon by knowing who he is, among almost everything else in existence.
Triangulum! Entangulum!
To show just how crazy and random this three-sided being is, he makes a nearby deer's teeth just fly out of its mouth, and puts them all in Gideon's hands. This is a really creepy moment, especially if you have some sort of phobia surrounding teeth, which is not uncommon. What a very weird way to introduce yourself. Moving on, next up we have the Season 2 moment of Grunkle Stan's balloon. In the episode The Love God, the Woodstick Music Festival comes to town, and festive hot air balloons are all around. In an attempt to advertise to the hipster youth attendees about the Mystery Shack, Stan makes a balloon of his head with the message, "I heart kids."
It's heaven's punishment for our terrible taste in everything!
The balloon's cheery message and appearance soon goes south due to Stan's lack of attention to safety hazards, and catches on fire. It now resembles a demonic-looking Stan with the message, "I eat kids." This moment is creepy as much as it is hilarious. Next up, we have the Screaming Head, another creepy summoning of Bill Cipher's. In Season 2's sock opera, while Mabel spends the week putting together a sock puppet musical to impress her crush of the week, Dipper tries unlocking the laptop found in the author's bunker. After dozing off, trying to find the correct password for it, Bill Cipher pays him a visit. In Dipper's mindscape, Bill greets him in the similar manner toward Gideon. Instead of a gift of deer teeth, Bill conjures a screaming head. A literal severed head of a man, just screaming non-stop. What's really disturbing about this moment is when Bill makes it disappear by having its layers unraveled, from muscle to bone. But moving on to the Floating Head Island. After Season 1, a whole summer's worth of shorts were released to keep fans satisfied while waiting for the next season. The first wave of these were titled Dipper's Guide to the Unexplained. In the Tooth short, Dipper and Mabel set out to investigate a giant tooth left on the lake's beach. While rowing towards an island in the lake, Mabel brings out her creepy stuffed animal, Barrow. But that's the least of our concerns here. As they notice bubbles in the water, the island floats up and towards the two, revealing it to be a giant floating head. This bizarre and creepy monstrosity has giant eyes, teeth, and a mouth that it uses to try to eat their boat. What really makes this creature disturbing is the strange rambling it makes, which, when played backwards, says, "You have awakened my slumber. Enter my mouth, children. Enter your destiny," which is messed up and is sure to send a shiver down your spine. In our fifth spot, we have the Cooler Monster. Now, this one isn't like the ones in Futurama, hell-bent on stealing the knowledge of the universe. No, this one's quite terrifying. In Season 1's The Inconveniencing, Dipper and Mabel join Wendy and her teenage friends to break into an abandoned convenience store, kinda like a discount stay overnight in a haunted house. But after breaking in, they find this store to be just as scary.
Maybe let's not do that.
Dipper's the one who notices all the paranormal, spooky happenings before everyone else. But the one moment that really shocks viewers is when he goes to grab more ice. At the cooler, a floating brain with a mouth, eye stalks, and tendrils all over scares him. Of all the haunted things in this episode, this one definitely had the most details put into it, and it's definitely scary enough to catch you off guard. Next, we have Bill taking over Dipper. Later on in Sock Opera, Dipper becomes desperate to figure out that password and makes a deal with Bill. Unfortunately, he didn't read the fine line and falls for Bill's trick of using Dipper as a puppet.
Yeesh, kid, relax!
For this moment, we're referring to the initial first interactions Bill has while possessing Dipper. The creepiness begins with how Dipper's eyes are replaced with the yellow glow of Bill's, and has long slits for irises. Within a minute, Bill is torturing himself, experimenting with pain by falling down the attic stairs, slamming his arm with a kitchen drawer, and puncturing it with a fork. This at first comes off as a laughable moment, but when rewatching, Bill's masochism just comes off as quite disturbing. Not to mention, he leaves the shack with a creepy maniacal laughter, with another distorted look in Dipper's body. I'd say this is where we start crossing into the terrifying territory, as our next entry is Pyramid Chase. Throughout his reign of terror in Weirdmageddon, Bill gets unhinged in several moments. The earliest we see this more diabolical side of him is when he wipes out Time Baby, as remaining townsfolk's resistance falters, and the two pairs of Pines twins are all that's left. A new plan to stop Bill forms. Dipper and Mabel run off to distract our now three-dimensional villain, and he shows off his arguably most terrifying form yet. Dead set on killing the Pines twins, he transforms into a giant red pyramid and grows several spider-like arms, with 3 tongues protruding out of the layers of his body. This unsettling look of his while chasing Dipper and Mabel is complemented by him yelling,
"I've got some children I need to make into corpses!"
"I've got some children I need to make into corpses," which would be an incredibly dark line even if it wasn't in a children's show. But a kid's show out loud expressing the desire of kids being killed. That's just super, super dark. Moving deeper into the realm of terrifying, we have Darlene. In Season 2's Roadside Attraction, Grunkle Stan takes Dipper, Mabel, and Mabel's friends, Candy and Grinda, along with him to vandalize other roadside attractions across Oregon. After ruining attractions such as an old lady's giant yarn ball and an upside-down house, and Dipper taking his Grunkle's dating advice, they wind up at Mystery Mountain. This location, 5 times the size of the Mystery Shack, contains paranormal attractions of mummies and spider people. Darlene, seemingly a normal middle-aged woman running the place, appears okay at first, but later, as Stan takes a tour with her inside the mountain, becomes her latest prey.
You're so funny.
Darlene reveals her true form, walking in at first with her lower half a spider, then turns her face inside out to full arachnoid being. What makes this even more scary is the lifeless skeletons hanging around Stan as he's in her web, the so-called mummies, which sounds like a bad date to say the least. Next up, we have Hoo-Ha's Owl animatronics. In Seuss and the Real Girl, Seuss finally gets a date with a woman, and they meet at a Chuck E. Cheese-esque place called Hoo-Ha's Owl's Pizza-Matronic Jamboree. Here, the Doki Doki-like computer girl he practiced dating comes to take back Seuss by possessing the animatronics of the establishment. And yes, I know what you're thinking, this was a spot-on Five Nights at Freddy's reference, which made it all the more horrifying with the beginning of it starting off with,
Hoo-Ha the Owl is dead.
sorry friends, Hoo-Ha the Owl is dead. The animatronics proceed to go rampant and kidnap Mabel, Dipper, and Seuss's girlfriend. Their reign of terror ends as scary as it began, with a terrifying face melt on the lead robot. It's also worth mentioning that this episode came out literally a month after Five Nights was released. Moving on to Scary Oak Zombies. From the titular Season 2 episode, Dipper meets a pair of government agents, thinking these two men can help him solve the mystery of the author's identity. His hopes are quickly shot down as the agents assure Dipper there's nothing paranormal about this place.
We have other spots to investigate.
In an effort to prove them wrong, Dipper uses the journal to summon a horde of the undead. Their first act is dragging the two agents away into the woods, never to be seen until the episode's end. The grotesque zombies then lay waste to the Mystery Shack's party being held, and battle the Pines family. Zombie guts spill as they combat the undead, a terrifying start to the second season. Next we have the Summerween Trickster. In the series' only Halloween special, Summerween, Seuss tells a story of being known as the Summerween Trickster, made of all the unwanted candy. Shortly after his story, the trickster himself appears at the door. His unsettling voice, unusual stature, raggedy brown outfit, and demeanor is what scares us about this guy.
I will let you live.
But then it gets worse. A kid, Gordy, comes to the shack for candy, and the trickster straight up eats him. Originally, he had a lighter color scheme in the promo for the episode, but the final dark coloration made him all the more terrifying. Taking our 4th place ranking for most terrifying Gravity Falls moment, we have Preston Northwest's face. At the beginning of Bill Cipher's reign over Gravity Falls and Weirdmageddon Part 1, we see him and his strange friends cement their terror over the townsfolk. Bill shows us his unsightly new transformations. But what really was horrifying in this episode was his display of power over one individual.
How about instead I shuffle the functions of every hole in your face?
As Grunkle Ford and others challenge Bill, wealthy resident Preston Northwest expresses his willingness to pledge loyalty to Bill. Bill doesn't care, so he has a bit of fun by rearranging the orifices in Preston's face. This messed up scene shows his ears sticking out where his eyes were, a giant eye out of his mouth, and a nose where his ear was. Taking our bronze medal for most terrifying scene, we have the Shapeshifter. Season 2's Into the Bunker brought us several intense moments. Deep inside the author's bunker, Dipper and Wendy are rescued from a monster by a strange man they conclude is the author. Giving him journal number 2, Dipper and Wendy soon realize the man is a shapeshifter from a can of beans, with his current form printed on it. He catches on to them and changes into a hideous monster with an elongated neck and spider-like legs sticking out. But this form of the shapeshifters isn't the scariest. That title goes to his form when he chases the Pines twins, creating a messed up combination of the two with ghostly eyes, sharp teeth, and 6 arachnoid legs. This character has one messed up imagination, and he also probably scarred Dipper for life when they froze him. Taking the silver medal for most terrifying moment in Gravity Falls, we have Mabel's dream world. In Weirdmageddon 2, Escape from Reality, Dipper, Wendy, and Seuss travel into a bubble where Bill Cipher kept Mabel inside. What they find is a whole world full of 80s vibes and cutesy preteen girl drawings. This world is Mabel's escape from the uncertainty of growing up and preferring imagination over reality. Everyone but Dipper is taken in awe by their imaginations coming real. He continues trying to get Mabel out of this prison, but in one moment that began heartfelt, quickly morphs into something incredibly messed up. Wendy appears to Dipper, trying to convince him this dream world isn't so bad. After suggesting his summer crush on her could become a reality by making himself older, he soon sees it's too good to be true. The figure masquerading as Wendy turns into a hive of cockroach-like creatures and falls apart. The sky around him turns blood red, and a tree with stuffed animals now has glowing yellow eyes, as do the animals. Bill's eye shape appears in each of the stuffed animals, warning Dipper that he's watching. Shortly after, everything is back to Mabel's happy imaginary landscape. In our opinion, this episode's light tone throughout, before abruptly shifting to something so messed up, is why we had to rank it so high. But finally, our gold medal for most terrifying Gravity Falls moments has to go to the Northwest Mansion curse. In Northwest Mansion Mystery, Dipper is called to help expel a ghost haunting the Northwest Mansion during their annual fancy party. Pacifica brings him to the room with the most paranormal activity. Dipper is convinced this ghost is nothing serious, but soon is proven very wrong when lightning strikes and the picture of a lumberjack in the room disappears. The mounted taxidermy animal heads begin dripping blood from their mouth and eyes, chanting ancient sins in scary deep voices.
The forest dark shall once more rise.
To end it all, a fiery skeleton of a man with an axe lodged in his forehead emerges from the fireplace, grows flesh, and drags his axe across the room. It's really no surprise that this one earns the gold medal of terrifying. The bleeding animals alone make this one of the most unsettling and terrifying moments in Gravity Falls and possibly any Disney show we can think of. In fact, this scene terrified so many, it had fans wondering how the creator, Alex Hirsch, managed to get it past Disney's censors, especially given people were surprised back in season 1 when they showed Dipper get a nosebleed. One of the most captivating animated shows in the last decade. For 2 seasons in a 4-year span, Gravity Falls allured viewers with its mysteries, intricate plot, and well-written humor. Set in the summer in a small town with strange anomalies, Gravity Falls sees many strange happenings, some of which can be considered criminal.
You think I've been having fun in here?
Hey, best friend!
Many characters throughout the show have been known to create havoc throughout the titular Oregon town, but what if they had to answer for their crimes? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and today we're sentencing Gravity Falls characters for their crimes. Court is in session. Now today we'll be looking at the actions of various characters committed that would be considered criminal. And no, we won't be giving out any passes for heroes. We'll merely be looking at any questionable criminal things they've done, and giving our sentences based on the severity as any judge would. And for this video, we'll also be taking into account Oregon laws, as the show is set in that state. Now first up on the docket, we have Mr. Mystery himself, Stanley Pines. Known throughout the show for his fake tourist attractions and greedy business practices, he leads a secret life trying to bring his brother back from a dimensional portal. From the day he was kicked out for accidentally ruining his brother's high school science project, Stan has gotten himself into a series of criminal activities, selling defective products like the Sham Total towel or the shoddy Stanco pitchforks. He was banned from 32 out of 50 states for these defective products. That's well over half the country he's not allowed to step foot in. Sometime after these failed business ventures, he committed some heist in Colombia that resulted in him being thrown in prison. After reuniting with his brother, Stanford Pines, he's tasked with hiding his brother's research. Stanford is too proud of his work to let Stanley burn it, resulting in a scuffle that ends with Ford falling into his dimensional portal. Since then, Stanley tries to find out how to reactivate the portal to bring his brother back, looking for ways to make money to procure the technology to do so. He assumes the identity of Stanley Stanford Pines in ownership of his home, turning it into a tourist trap that allures the townspeople. Throughout his time as Mr. Mystery, Stan is said to have gotten in trouble with other endeavors. In the episode Stanchurian Candidate, it was said he was accused of pug trafficking across multiple states. In Bottomless Pit's Truthic, Stan admits to committing tax fraud. He also oversaw Dipper and Mabel's usage of illegal fireworks, which are specifically illegal in Oregon.
Here you go, sweetie. Set something on fire for your Grunkle Stan.
Lastly, the events of the Season 2 episode, Not What He Seems, shows Stan stealing barrels of radioactive chemicals. And during the universe portal's activation, several gravity anomalies occur throughout the day. I mean, entire buildings and people's cars just float up into the air, and then come crashing down. That is a lot of property damage. So let's get to the sentencing. First off, his initial crimes of a failed heist and being banned for defective products will not be counted towards this sentence. As selling defective products is a crime, it's likely a civil one, and being banned from entire states for them sounds a bit too far, though his products like the rip-off bandage could have him sued for creating rashes, maybe even a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Then his Colombian prison sentence was already served, so that crime is no longer applicable. The charges that are relevant to this sentence are animal trafficking, tax fraud, identity theft, illegal possession of fireworks, widespread property damage, and theft of radioactive chemicals. Likely, Stanford Pines won't press charges against his brother for impersonating him, as he would understand it was all to obtain the money to build the portal to bring him back. But stealing these chemicals will be the heaviest charge for Stan. That and tax fraud, as nobody messes with the IRS and lives to tell. In Oregon, the possession of fireworks amounts to a $1,000 fine, and a federal offense of stealing chemicals amounts to $200K. But that latter charge of stealing chemicals will also land him in federal prison for 10 years, with no chance of parole. You had a good run, Stan. Good luck in prison. Next up, we have Gideon Gleeful, the first main antagonist of the series. Gideon 2 operated a tourist attraction with the tent of telepathy, after becoming enemies with Stan Pines, and making enemies with his nephew Dipper. Gideon went to some great lengths to take him and the Mystery Shack down. First on Gideon's list of crimes is kidnapping. He literally held Dipper and Mabel hostage in his room after shrinking them in the Season 1 episode, Little Dipper. After that, he breaks into Stan's home and causes property damage, breaking the mirrors he set up. Throughout the rest of Season 1, Gideon attempts to break into the shack multiple times. In Dreamscaperers, he steals the deed to Stan's house from his safe by blowing it up with dynamite, which is illegal in the state, much like fireworks. In the Season 1 finale, Gideon Rises, he committed massive spying on the townspeople through his button cameras, which landed him in prison. And he destroys a bus with a giant mech.
Once I find the final journal, I'll rule this town!
Lastly, in Weirdmageddon Part 1, Gideon and his fellow inmates break out of prison upon Bill Cipher's arrival. So we have kidnapping, property damage, breaking and entering, illegal possession of dynamite, mass spying on civilians, property damage, and breaking out of prison. Quite a resume for a 10-year-old child. Again, possession of dynamite, like fireworks in Oregon, is a $1,000 fine. In the state, kidnapping in the first degree is a minimum 90-month sentence, when for the purpose of a ransom. In Gideon's case, the Mystery Shack deed. Considering Gideon was tried as an adult and thrown in prison for his surveillance crime, we would give him the same level of treatment with a sentence of 10 years in prison, with a chance of parole, though likely he'll form another prison gang and break out again. Our third character is Preston Northwest. Wealthiest resident of Gravity Falls, Preston comes from a family who owes their wealth and fame to the fabled founder of Gravity Falls, Nathaniel Northwest. We're not sure what shady business dealings he may have going on, but the main crimes we'll focus on are in regards to treatment of his daughter and actions with a cult. His daughter, Pacifica, molded to be flawless and graceful, isn't given the honor roll student treatment. Throughout the series, we see how distant Preston and his wife treat Pacifica, often neglectful, not giving time to watch her mini-golf match against Mabel.
We have a party to go to. We'll just read about your victory in the paper.
But in the Northwest Mansion mystery, a darker side of Pacifica's relationship with her father is revealed. Every time Pacifica speaks out of turn to voice how she feels, he rings a bell to keep her in line. This can be registered as psychological abuse. The other great offense Preston has committed was as a member of the Blind Eye Society. Along with several other Gravity Falls residents, he assisted interested in kidnapping residents and memory wiping them. Preston's crimes amount to psychological manipulation of his daughter, which would be considered child abuse, and kidnapping. In his state, this abuse gets him a year in jail, and kidnapping 7.5 years. Thus, we sentence Preston Northwest to 8 years in prison with no parole. But knowing him, he'll probably get some favors in prison to make life a bit more enjoyable. Speaking of the Blind Eye Society, next we have the ringleader, Blind Ivan. The Blind Eye Society was first founded by Fiddleford McGucket after being exposed to the Dark Dimension via Stanford Pine's universe portal. McGucket wanted to forget the horrifying things he saw. Inventing the memory gun, he wiped his memories of Bill Cipher's evil, and wanted to extend this to townspeople who witnessed the strange things in the town. After using the memory gun so much and going crazy, this tattooed guy took over the society from McGucket. In his tenure, he coordinated kidnapping citizens of Gravity Falls and forcibly removed their memories. He may not remember his crimes anymore after having the memory gun used on him, so the state's law giving 90 months seems a tad bit much for this special case. But for these heinous acts and his special circumstances, we sentence Blind Ivan, or Toot Toot McBumbersnazzle as he's known now, to the slammer for 5 years, with a chance of parole. And lastly, we have the big bad himself, Bill Cipher. If we had to charge this extra-dimensional weird creature as a human, the list of his crimes would be as long as a bottomless pit. It's hard to pinpoint his crimes in the Mindscape, so for the sake of this video, let's focus on what we've seen throughout his reign of terror in Weirdmageddon. To start off, he possessed Blendon Blandon's body to destroy the Universal Rift. Untold damage is caused by Bill and his gang throughout Gravity Falls.
It's time to take our chaos worldwide!
People are kidnapped left and right via his eyeball bats and turned into pieces for a throne. Citizens are tortured, like Preston Northwest's face and Grunkle Ford and Bill's interrogation of him, and Time Baby and a unit of his Time Anomaly enforcers are just outright killed by Bill. We're looking at kidnapping, torture, and mass murder, and for that, we're giving Bill Cipher the death penalty via Time Baby. According to an end credits cryptogram, it will take 1,000 years for him to regrow his molecules, so maybe we'll hold Bill inside his universe for the time being. Or we can have Blendon use his time lapse to bring Bill to a time in the past when Time Baby still lives.
Wait, stop everything! I've got something to say!
Gravity Falls has a special place in our hearts. Whether it's the mysteries of Gravity Falls or the lovable characters, there's always something to love about our weird little town. But today, we'll be focusing on the not-so-beloved characters and figure out which ones should be banished to the other dimension. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and these are the worst Gravity Falls characters and why they suck. As usual, we'll be starting with the characters who suck the least and working our way down to the most hated. Now, this may anger a lot of people, but at the bottom of this list, we have Mabel Pines. And before you start yelling at us in the comment section, just hear us out. Mabel is beloved by the characters and the fans. Her enthusiasm and free spirit gives a smile to everyone, and she's very loyal to her family. For most of Season 1, she acted as the supportive sister and the happy-go-lucky character that everyone wants to be friends with. However, we're giving her this spot for a couple of good reasons. Mabel has made more selfish decisions in the second season. In the episode Into the Bunker, she decided to shove Dipper and Wendy into a closet to get Dipper to confess his feelings. This unintentionally put them in danger due to the shapeshifter, and Mabel didn't believe them when they said there was a monster with them.
The only monsters are your own inner demons, Dipper.
In the episode The Love God, she hit Robbie and Tambry with a love potion, despite the Love God warning her that it would cause major social consequences. In the series finale Weirdmageddon, Mabel used her prison to create Mabeland, a world full of fantasies in an attempt to escape from reality. She allowed her emotions and fear of growing up to cloud her mind, and she refused to go back to reality. She got Wendy and Suze to embrace Mabeland, much to Dipper's anger and disagreement. And we can't forget that she created Dippy Fresh, a character replacement of Dipper that the fandom hates. Overall, she's at the bottom of this list since Mabel is a beloved character in the series, and while she has the best intentions, we can't get past the selfish decisions she's made in the series. Moving on to Grunkle Stan's brother, Ford Pines. Ford was introduced in the second half of Season 2. He was revealed to be the author of the journals and Stan's twin brother. Dipper believes he got his smarts and logical thinking from his great-uncle Grunkle Ford. His character was shrouded in mystery, and when he was finally introduced, we picked up a lot of backstory for him in Grunkle Stan. Dipper likes Ford better than Stan, but we list him as one of the worst characters for not having enough character development. He resented Stan for what he did back in high school, but he didn't move on or get any character development until the series finale. Next is Mabel's former archenemy, Pacifica Northwest. Pacifica was a stereotypical rich girl that brushed off Mabel, as well as her friends and the Pines, because she was rich, and they weren't.
Tell your servant I like his W-neck.
Yes!
She would go out of her way to humiliate Mabel and crush any kind of hopes and dreams she had. For 3/4 of the series, she served as a minor antagonist for Mabel and the gang, and Mabel would do her best to prove her wrong. She does deserve to be on this list, as fans did hate her annoying rich girl traits. However, she doesn't rank lower since we did get some character development for her. In the episode Northwest Mansion Mystery, we learned more about her family and how Pacifica was treated by her parents. Her great-great-grandfather, Nathaniel Northwest, became notably snobbish, excluded common folk from the grand party against his promise, and we learned the achievements the family claimed throughout their history were lies. Pacifica didn't tell Dipper because she was afraid to stand up to her parents. She regretted what she did, and she didn't want to be like them. So while Pacifica is still working on being a better person than her parents and her family, we have to keep her on the list. Next, we have the main antagonist of the series, Bill Cipher. Bill is a pretty mixed bag when it comes to popularity among fans. He's a character that fans love and hate. Bill is the main villain of the series and is seen to be very powerful, but can be weak at times.
This is our town now, boys!
He causes every beloved character pain wherever he goes. He possessed Dipper, manipulated Mabel with the prison he made for her, and tormented the residents of Gravity Falls. So while Bill is an evil and manipulative villain, he just doesn't rank any lower because there are fans that have much more love for Bill than hate. In 4th place, just outside the podium, we have the spoiled brat, Gideon Gleeful. It shouldn't be a surprise to see Gideon on the list. When we were introduced to him, he seemed like a kind and generous kid with psychic powers. Gideon gains a massive crush on Mabel, and they date for a little bit. After Dipper attempts to let Gideon down easy for Mabel, Gideon's true colors are revealed. He's a psychopath and a liar that will stop at nothing to get what he wants. He's also a spoiled brat who takes over the Mystery Shack to find the journals and gain the ultimate power he desires.
Woo-wee! Look what the apocalypse dragged in.
After he was proven to be a fraud and a liar, he was sent to prison and later attempted to escape. While he is a horrible character to the series and the fans, we can't rank him lower because in the finale, he promised to end his evil deeds. And furthermore, our top 3 are just way more hated. Our bronze medal for worst character in Gravity Falls is going to Gideon's father, Bud Gleeful. This may be an odd choice to put Bud on the list over Gideon, but we have a good reason. Bud is Gideon's father and a paltering con man like Stan. He runs Gleeful's auto sale in Gravity Falls. He is polite, kind, and friendly to everyone, but he palms off used cars as brand new. However, the main reason we're giving him the bronze medal is because of his lack of parenting skills. He lets Gideon get whatever he wants and lets him do whatever he wants, nor does he dispense any punishment when he misbehaves.
What have I told you?
Tickling is no laughing matter.
Basically, he raised Gideon to be the selfish, condescending jerk that he is. He has a more malicious side in the episode The Stauncherian Candidate, where he runs for mayor of Gravity Falls. He only wanted to run so that he could pardon Gideon and release him from prison, though he only gets the bronze medal because most of the things he does are out of fear for his own son, though you really shouldn't let your own misbegotten kid run your life. Our silver medal for worst character in Gravity Falls is Wendy's ex-boyfriend, Robbie Valentino. Robbie is a typical grumpy teenager who we would probably know from school. He's apathetic, cold, and condescending towards younger kids, especially Dipper. With his careless attitude, he is insensitive to people's needs, thoughts, and opinions. Although he does care for Wendy, he lies to her a lot to have her love. What makes him really hated is that it feels like Robbie's only role for the show is to be a rival to Dipper, which is a trope that has become quite boring.
Oh man, I am so gonna enjoy this.
After Wendy breaks breaks up with Robbie. He attempts to get back together with Wendy several times throughout the series, until the episode The Love God. Overall, Robbie is pretty hated with the fan community because of the monotonous trope. However, we feel that there are not one, but two people who are worse than he is, and earn the ranking of most hated characters in Gravity Falls. So without further ado, our gold medal for worst characters in all of Gravity Falls are Pacifica's parents, Preston and Priscilla Northwest. Out of all the characters in Gravity Falls, Preston and Priscilla are undoubtedly the worst characters in the show. We'll be ranking them together since they play about the same role. They're the richest people in Gravity Falls, along with their daughter, Pacifica. Like many wealthy socialites, they look down on the lower class, seeing them as worthless and disgusting. In the episode Northwest Mansion Mystery, we see more of their true character. Preston is merciless, ruthless, and callous, and sees anyone below him as tools for his own benefit. He even goes on to call them their kind.
Do you think they'd come here if they had to rub elbows with your kind?
While Priscilla is very vain and takes great pride in her looks. She allows Preston to control their daughter by ringing a bell so that she can live up to their standards. Neither of them care for Pacifica, only seeing her as a tool for the Northwest family name. What really wins them the gold medal is that they don't seem to care about other wealthy socialites either. When the ghost of Northwest Manor turns everyone into wood and attempts to burn down the mansion along with everyone in it, Preston and Priscilla simply go into their panic room and attempt to leave everyone for dead, just to protect their family name. This proves that they have no shame for what they've done, and would rather run from their problems than face them. So both Preston and Priscilla more than deserve the gold medal for worst characters in all of Gravity Falls. We might even list them in the journals as monsters if we can.